Thanks, Danny, and good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I think having done one of these things a while back, we think the best approach is if everyone can keep themselves on mute for now, and that means we're not getting any interference. And I'll run through the presentation, which is about just shy of 20 slides. It sounds worse than it hopefully will be. So you'll hopefully see the whole proposition, my theory, that's a bit of a grand term, but my theory around the importance of a diverse career path and experience in a challenge, at least one challenge organisation, and how I think that'll add to your leadership skill. And then we'll open up questions. So I think the idea is we'll run through this, and if you've got questions as you go along, you can post them into the chat room, and we'll collect those. And if not, make a note of it. And if you think there's something particularly interesting and pertinent, make a note of it, and then we'll come back to it, and then we'll hope to have a good conversation. My experience is there's lots of really good ideas out there. So it's not just me presenting this, having all the answers. There's a lot of experience and wisdom I find in these sorts of things, so I'm sure it'll be really good. So if I start off, Danny, with the next slide, is I've got two propositions, and the two are clearly connected but are different. And the first is that experience in a range of sectors, and I haven't narrowed it down to health sectors either in this, will equip you for better success in tomorrow's healthcare system. I'll give you some ideas of why I think that's important, with a bit of homespun theory, a bit more advanced than that, but not much. And what I've seen over the course of my career, and I've been a chief exec since '97, so it's knocking around for a few years in various guises. I'll come on to that. And I guess that proposition also is brought out through a bit of frustration I get sometimes with people who've got very great experience in a particular field, but without the breadth and depth that I'm looking for as a chief exec. So that's the first one. The second proposition, and maybe this is driven because where I am in one of the most, if not the most, challenged trusts in the country. It's been a challenge organisation for a long time. To give you some flavour of that, I think I'm the 13th chief exec in 15 years. So I've been here just over 2 years or so. A really hard environment in Lincolnshire, some great stuff too. And I remember talking to people in my early career about the importance of working in difficult places. I thought they were difficult until I came here, until I've talked to my colleagues. So they're my two propositions, and I'm going to bring that to life through a bit of analysis, a bit of a review. And as Danny's pointed out, the third slide there is, so on what basis would I say that working in a diversity of environments is important, and what basis would I say that working in a challenged organisation is good for your career and good for you to be a stronger, more effective leader going forward? Part of it is a bit of analysis that was very much part of our thinking when I was the chief exec of the NHS Leadership Academy. I'm sure you're familiar with that, but if you haven't come across it, I'll cover some of that ground. But also, just as valid is what I see, what I've seen as my own experience in a range of health sectors. And before I joined the NHS in the early 90s, I spent 10 years in housing, so a very different environment. And also what I have heard from other chief execs, other leaders at different levels, clinical and non-clinical. So that's less evidence-based, but certainly as valid. So that's the evidence base. So we'll come on now to the first bit, which is the healthcare leadership model. For those of you who've been knocking around as long as me or longer than me, the NHS had various leadership models. In my head, they've built over the years from various different frameworks. This one, the Rubik's Cube approach, was generated in about 2013. There was lots of work done on the evidence base using international sectors. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it has worked very effectively over the last 5 years. And we know that there's lots of good evidence that people going through the Leadership Academy's programs have had successful careers. So I think there's some strength to this, and I'll I'll come on to the 9 domains, Danny, the next slide. The slide before that, which just basically talks about the theory behind the health leadership model. And basically it says that if you've got greater self-awareness, self-control, self-knowledge, determination, resilience, and other personal qualities, you have better leadership behaviours, and you can have productive, care-focused and engaged climate in your teams, and basically you get a better end product. So there's no particular newness to that, but that's the theory behind the health leadership model. And a lot of hard work went into these 9 dimensions, these 9 domains. And if you are familiar with the leadership model, each of these are exploded, so inspiring shared purpose, leading with care, and so on, exploded with definition of what that actually means. What does inspiring shared purpose actually look like for yourself, your team, your peers, and your manager, and also giving some idea of to the levels of which you operate, from sort of basic levels all the way through to exemplary. So each of those domains have that split. And going through these, there are a number which I think are relevant to my proposition that working particularly in different sectors, as I said, not just health, but also in other sectors, is helpful to become a more effective leader. The one example, Danny, I'm going to give on the next slide, please, is connecting our service. Now, the reason why I've chosen this one is because wherever you are in a health service, whether you're working in a CCG, in an acute hospital, mental health, community services, or primary care, working in some of the arm's length bodies, some of the regulators, there's no doubt that it's a very tough world, absolutely hard environment we live in. And we're all trying to work much more collaboratively together, because we have to connect across health services and health and social care particularly, but also with other agencies such as housing, education, and obviously public health. And working across those different sectors, we are trying to make sure that the deal for our patients and the public are better designed, and they fit together, align better together. So going back to 2012, when this model was generated, we said, what does connecting our service mean? It means understanding how health and social care services fit together, and how different people, teams, organisations interconnect and interact. And the thinking behind that was we're often seen as a very isolated sector. If you have worked, some of you listening may have worked outside the NHS or outside the health sector, and you'll have heard that the NHS system is very insular. We live in our own world, even though it's huge with over a million staff and a huge spend. We're very, very isolated, very insular, and we have our own language. We work very hard, long hours, etc., but we work as teams within the NHS. But those outside the pure NHS find it hard to connect with us. I think it's got a lot better over the last few years, particularly social care, but beyond that into housing, into other aspects of public services. Whilst it works well in many places, it doesn't work as well as it should. And then the further away we get from the true NHS, the harder people find to find ways into us. And there's a question about how our leaders, who are often clinicians only trained in NHS ways of the world, that's pretty unusual in other sectors. So you may get people in engineering, you may get people in IT who very easily transcend different sectors completely, working in retail 1 minute, into service industry the next, and they may well change nations in all of that. So the NHS it's not unique to the UK, is seen as very isolated and insular. So this understanding of how we connect is very important. And if we understand how leaders, just go back a bit, one please. Sorry. That second sentence. Why is it important? If we can really understand what makes other teams and organisations tick, what they see as valuable, how they see their life, and how they see the connectivity with the NHS. If we really understand that, we can be a better partner. That's fundamentally what it's about. We can be a better partner if we understand what drives, what success criteria other teams. Thanks, Danny. The next one. So that's what it stands for. The exemplary level, which is the top level of this dimension, says to be a really strong, effective, exemplary leader in the NHS. That's what the healthcare leadership model is about. Is that we need to have leaders who can work strategically across the system, and we know this absolutely of the moment with the work of SGPs and accountable care organisations, integrated care systems, and so on. The measure of that is, it's a test, if you like, in the dimensions, is do I build strategic relationships to make links across the broader system? Do I understand how complex connections across the health economy affect the efficiency of the whole system? And that's particularly viewing it, in my eyes, from the perspective of the patient as well as the taxpayer. And do I understand which issues affect decisions across the system? So it's really thinking through what it's like to be, for example, it's a very hot topic, as we know, a local authority member with an interest in healthcare or social care, and seeing it from their perspective as the locally democratic member for a patch, and saying, in light of what they're seeing and how they view their significance of their service and the connection with the NHS, do we as NHS leaders understand that full enough to be far more effective partners? That's what that's about, and I think that's a massive issue for the NHS and health systems as we go through it. In spite of the potential for additional money that may come into the system, that requirement in the challenge we have, particularly for older people, will not change, in my view, regardless of any cash coming into the system. And it may well, in fact, reinforce it. Of course, we're now part of a new government department of health and social care. But it's not just social care I'm talking about here. It is about with other sectors, other partners. It's about certainly housing, education, and I would also argue there's something around the wider economy in terms of how independent sector and commercial sector fit in as well. And that's not just about independent sector trying to generate income from us. It's about the opportunities that we have to work with our commercial organisations, particularly around what I will call risk stratification of families and individuals that have a range of needs which can be met by a combination of private and public sector. For me, it's about how we potentially want to rebalance the deal between the state and society and understanding how that operates going forward. So that's the context of that. Danny, the next one. There are other dimensions of those 9 NHS Leadership Academy model dimensions. It wasn't just about connecting the services, evaluating information, engaging the team, influencing results. There's a few examples there of, in my view, the importance of understanding the role that we have as leaders wherever we are in the system in a slightly different way, and that's about not just looking at it from an NHS career perspective, either a clinician or a manager, and thinking about concepts, pathway systems, support arrangements, or where the examples of good practice are, either in the UK or internationally, and looking at it from a range of different perspectives. Thanks, Danny. So that's a sort of academic theory, a little bit of how it fits in. I recall this statement, which was probably about 10 years ago. It changed the way I thought about my own career development, and this is not unique to one person. I've heard this sort of thing mentioned in other organisations, and they're talking about this is about the challenge of organisations rather than diversity. And this particular chief exec was a very fast track, I think he was an ex-NHS management trainee, had gone through a range of organisations, and then we all thought at the time, and this person personally was slightly deranged about going to from a very senior position in a good trust to a very difficult trust, well known for being really challenged. And I said to this person, I said, "Why the heck did you do that?" And they said, "Well, yeah, it's a bit of a career risk, but I wanted to go into this organisation, to a very difficult job, and in my view, if I survived that, which they then did, they did a really good job there. They went on to become a really successful, and still are a really successful chief exec, and when I talked to them, they said that was the plan, and in their views, it absolutely made them a better chief executive, having to work in that environment, a much more challenging environment. And this links to my second line on the, which is I hear it's a heck of a lot, and I see this in interviews. So I interview a lot of senior leaders, both in the trust and have over the years, but also for other organisations. And people say I've got 5 years worth of experience, and when you pursue it, what they've really had is 1 year's worth of experience that's been repeated year on year. And when you try and extract out of their experience what's new, it's very limited. That's not their fault. It's about how they are often constrained by their role and constrained by the organisation's ability to give them that experience. And what we're looking for, obviously, in very senior leaders, but also middle managers these days more and more, is people who've got properly 5 years worth of experience. When I interview, I often see CVs that have said, key success criteria, and then often that is demonstrated by achievements, and I try and unpick the experience and when was it, and how much of that has been spread over a number of years, and often it's spread over maybe the last 10 years, and it's pretty thin. And of course, in a much challenged and tough environment that we have, getting people who are able to demonstrate that they've got real success in difficult circumstances, which of course is our position now. That's really really able to demonstrate partnership working, clinical delivery, improvement of quality. All those things we look for all the time is really important. And I think it's very hard in a well-run organisation when people are very narrow in their remit. And certainly the people we employed at ULHT recently have had that. And our job is to support them going forward. Next one, please, Danny. So in terms of what I've seen personally, so I've mentioned that before I joined the NHS, I joined the NHS part of a fast-track senior leaders program. So it was like a management training scheme, plus trying to bring people into the then newly formed NHS Trust in the early 90s from outside the NHS. I spent 10 years in housing, and I had a different value stream, not one that pretty similar, because it was a very much a social enterprise approach, but different from NHS. And I still go back to what I learned in that very good organisations I worked in around values and what it meant. So I've got some ability to balance what people told me the NHS values and put it into context of what I'd seen in the past. It was that 10 years still lives with me. And also some of the systems and processes that we are familiar with in the NHS were a real surprise to me when I joined. But also I learned how our organisations took shortcuts and did the things differently. And I think that enables me to challenge, even though I hadn't worked in that other sector outside the NHS, getting on for 20, 25, 30 years. I can still remember what was seen as possible and reasonable. And even though it feels very diverse in the NHS, there are other organisations with other sets of stakeholders, other drivers, other principals who like to work differently. So understanding how the voluntary sector really works, and I've spent a lot of time in the voluntary sector as opposed to some of the more institutionalised approaches in the NHS, means I can bring my own challenge to myself, but also I can bring some challenge and support to my team and my partners. Also looking at how others deliver, and it may seem odd, but we are quite process-driven in the NHS for often good reasons because of our regulatory pressures, and that's not necessarily the case in either the commercial sector when there is a lot of process stuff, but actually it's about the output at the end and really understanding what delivery means. And a good example of that was when I worked in the Department of Health. One of the measures of delivery was getting a document out to the service, and the measurement of delivery was we have produced the document, it has been approved by the Minister, and is now within the service to deliver. You and I know that was only 1/3 of the way to actually what was going to happen, which was the impact of that document as far as patients are concerned. And that links to the last point there is really trying to think about how we assess impact. And that, yeah, I remember I used to build a lot of houses for housing associations at one point, and assessing the impact was the impact on the clientele, which is elderly people, and really understanding what it was like for their lives and concentrating on that. We did some work with, as it was, IKEA then, and there's a brilliant chief executive of IKEA, and we linked a lot of his good ideas. And one of the things that I learned from them was the mock-up, a physical mock-up of a North American apartment with all the IKEA furniture in, with actors playing the role of, at that time it was 2 adults and 2 children, that probably changed now. It was supposed to be Monday morning at 7:30 with 2 working adults and 2 children of different ages going to different schools. And the concept was, what was their IKEA furniture going to do to change the life of that family in the way they got up and interacted, got their breakfast and got out the door on time to catch their various transports. It was completely a different approach to the way I thought about assessing impact. One example, there are many. Danny, next one, please. So I've had a very varied career. I came into the NHS in a large teaching acute, and then went up to the director of a DGH, also run community services. First chief exec job was in mental health, then a DGH chief exec job, then a PCT, primary care trust for those that are younger listening, precursors to CCGs, with a lot of work with primary care as well as having a provider arm. Then spent some time with Sir David Nicholson et al., NHS Management Executive, then as a Director General in the Department of Health, and then after running the Leadership Academy, I've come here. And there's no doubt, there's no doubt in my mind, I am a far better Chief Executive having worked in such a diversity of sectors. So I'm in a challenge system as well as a challenge trust. But my understanding of my colleagues working in community services, mental health, and as commissioners means I'm a much more, I think, reasonable person to do business with, because I understand what they're trying to get at. I can also offer support because I have some insights on how they operate. And I think it makes me a better chief exec to run the organisation too. But obviously, time will tell. Danny, we're almost there, folks. By the way, we're gonna get to the last few, and then we'll finish off. What's my view about organisation diversity? First of all, is domain knowledge. As I said, really understanding the difference between a LES and a DES in primary care makes my job of a acute chief executive handy. So when I'm talking to my primary care colleagues, I can understand what might be possible for them and what we can do to help. You also learn a lot of shortcuts. We're all very busy people, and the faster we can learn ways around to manage change, the better. So understanding what works in primary care, community services, mental health, and so on, and particularly at a national level, really helps. And I think there are different ways to engage clinical staff and staff at all levels. And again, looking at it from some of the big stuff that the Department of Health and the national players use all the time, applying it more locally has helped me, and I think will help others. I talk about help. I think it's a sign of strength, not weakness. We go for offers of help. And I've got a lot of contacts. That brings up the last point about wide networks. But I think people are very, very supportive. And as well as networks, it's about framing the ask of colleagues at local and national level. And if you have worked in those organisations, you do know people. It's all legitimate, above board, and no favours been done, but it helps you get things done because you know exactly what the organisation is looking for in terms of its criteria for success, not yours. Next one, please. Second one, in terms of valuable organisation diversity, it's just understanding this perspective. It takes 2 to tango. Partnership working is tough, it's hard, it's not just being nice to each other. And part of it is really understanding how other partners see value. Rather than seeing from our perspective of what's important for me, really understanding why they're doing what they're doing, why they're asking what they're asking, and how that plugs into their organisational criteria is really helpful. And the more you work closely with these other organisations, the easier it is to do partnership, in my view. And that brings up the organisational lenses and seeing the longer-term picture, and we are far too short-term in the NHS. Medium to longer term is far better to resolve short-term issues, in my view, although they don't necessarily go away. And that that builds better mutual understanding. And because the order of the day has to be partnership and system working, I think really understanding what it's like to work in a different organisation and getting their perspective on the classic is obviously the commissioner provider, if such things still exist, and understanding how to overcome those extremely helpful. Okay, Danny, next one. Almost there on the last couple of slides. So challenged organisations. The big difference I've seen since I've been in ULHT the last couple of years is a rapid learning cycle. It's incredibly fast moving. Things have to work because we have a big deficit. We have lots of performance issues, quality issues. The learning cycle is really speedy, and it's good to shortcut things. It's good to get things moving. It's sometimes very tough. We try things. If it works, we carry it on. If it doesn't, we drop it and move on to the next thing. Incredibly challenging to work within, but really, really exciting. But the rapid learning cycles are a really big difference between, I think, much more steady organisations that can be, not necessarily are all the time, but can be quite stoic in their approach and bureaucratic. That links to the pace to deliver. There's no doubt with the regulators that this trust has got financial special measures, quality special measures, and we regard ourselves as in A&E special measures, so triple special measures. The pace to deliver from the regulators is huge, but that's quite helpful sometimes because it means we have to move things forward. It feels like we're on the front line the whole time, and we get a lot of support for that. People, I think, particularly NHS Improvement nowadays, far more development orientated, so we're finding that extremely helpful. The third area there is transparency of impact. We feel like we're in a goldfish bowl. As a challenge organisation, we're on the front page of the newspapers for every time we do something or try something. Obviously have a lot of exposure to ministers, very senior leaders. That's scary in lots of ways, but it's also really great because when we get it right, we can see it working really, really fast. And our staff tell us, because we feel that fragile, our staff tell us pretty quickly where it's going well or badly, and we can see the impact. We have to be very, very clear about what the impact is, very visible because of our pressures, but we can also see transparency coming through and visibility really, really quickly. I would say if you stood back from most challenged organisations, the one thing that the one reason why they're challenged more than anything, whether it's money or quality of performance, is because of lack of staff engagement. It's a fundamental issue for ULHT. It's a fundamental issue, I think, for most of my colleagues in other quality or financial special measures. So learning the skills of how to engage staff who are really pressurised, who may have lost hope, who may have no faith or no trust in the organisation to move things forward, and finding a way to constructively engage with them. They, of course, do have the answers. We need to unlock those. So refining your own personal leadership skills in engaging staff, which is fundamental to any leader's job in the NHS or elsewhere, is absolutely paramount in these challenge organisations. Working at the top of competency, my staff tell me this all the time. You cannot be complacent, and most of the leaders here are working to the stretch of their skills. That can be very wearing, it can be quite tough. It's also really, really exciting, and that's why a lot of organisations try and poach the people who do well in ULHT or other organisations like us, because they know they've learned a massive range of skills and they are very attractive to go elsewhere. And lastly, people look at places like ULHT and they do what I call the Macmillan look. If you see them on the screen, they put the head to one side and go, "Ah, bless." We don't feel like that here. We get a lot of things right. As ever in challenge organisations, lots of really good things, and there is a real excitement when the organisation starts to move, which keeps many of our leaders here excited and ready for the next day and the next challenge. Next one, please. So warning notices both in changing career in different sectors and also in challenging organisations is this needs to be a bit planned. I'm not suggesting that people bounce around different sectors and different organisations. There needs to be some some science to it, and I've put their learning portfolios. People need to look at the competencies, the skills, experience they are seeking, and find a way of being clear about the gaps. It might be your own behaviours, it might be skills, competencies, your experience, and then using your career path to fill those gaps. It might be sideways moves, it might be moving out and across, that's all fine. But it's being very clear about what you're seeking from your different experiences, either in different sectors or in either challenged or easier organisations. And you must have a really, really good set of support mechanisms, not just one, not just a mentor or a coach or a learning set. You can also go on formal training programs, learning programs, but you must have support mechanisms in place. And going for challenged organisations, that is particularly important because these are very tough jobs. We know that resilience is key in good leadership behaviours. So they have to be put in place. And whilst it's the responsibility of the organisation to support you, I'm a great believer in asking and seeking support, not just relying on others to offer it. And I've talked a little bit about some of the leadership competencies in the NHS Leadership Academy framework. There's a lot in those 9 domains. I've concentrated on a few more. So it's really important to get a right balance. There's not one simple answer. The skill of a really good, effective leader to have a balance across those 9 dimensions. And lastly, we see a lot of this, don't we? It's the balance of stretch. Stretch is great, and challenge organisations are great, but it's about at your personal pace. I would never suggest to anybody to do something which is so uncomfortable that made them ill in any way, or they went too far. We do see this occasionally where people push themselves too far and burn out, and then it all has to go at a slower pace. So it's about being very clear about your own ability to cope with that level of change, that level of personal pressure. People have different points and milestones along that, and you'll have to work it through. And the best way of doing that, in my experiences, is ask your partner at home. So they'll always tell you if you have a partner, and ask people that you trust in the organisation. And if you do have a coach or a mentor, use those too. And then the very last slide, I think, we're almost there, folks, is I think career diversity is a really great thing. It's not the only thing that's important in your career. There are people that come across that have come out of a particular scheme and they've gone into general manager in urology, then gone through their skill and become an expert in surgery. There's a place for that. But these days, leaders, even in large acutes, I think, will benefit from having some idea of what it's like to work in other sectors in the NHS and elsewhere. Of course, there's no one simple solution to that. But my general view is to be a good leader, you need to understand different sectors and ideally other bits of the NHS. And well, I don't think I've got too many jobs available in the NHS at the moment. There will be other jobs, but if you want to come and work for us, I'm not just doing a pitch for the NHS trust here, but generally it's a good thing rather than a bad thing to work in a different organisation.